In this video, I'm going to show you how to download and install Android Studio, which is the program we're going to be using to write our Android applications. Now, just a reminder that this is the Mac video. So if you're running a Windows or Linux machine, there's actually a separate video that you can follow along with and watch for those operating systems in this section of the course. But if you're using a Mac, you're in the right place. So let's make a start. Now, it is important that you've already followed the instructions in the previous video to install the Java Development Kit. So if you haven't already done that, then do go back to that previous video and install the Java Development Kit first. Now, in terms of Android Studio, we can find that by going to developer.android.com. And we can scroll on down here and we can see Android Studio 2.2. I can click on Get Android Studio 2.2. And the download there option, I can click on Download. I can agree to the terms and conditions by clicking on the checkbox, and then click on Download Android Studio 2.2 for Mac. You can see that's downloading now. Now, one thing to be aware of is this new version of Android Studio, version 2.2, is very different to the previous version and has a number of new features that weren't available in that earlier version. Things like the Layout Designer, for example. So you'll need to be using Android Studio 2.2 or higher for this course. Now, if you've already got Android Studio 2.1 installed, you'll still need to install the 2.2 version for this course. So I've created a separate video on upgrading from Android Studio 2.1, so you may prefer to watch that video instead of this one. But with that said, it is quite simple, and Android Studio 2.1 will prompt you to update to Android Studio 2.2. So the bottom line is you definitely want to be running Android Studio 2.2. Alright, so we'll just let this download finish and we'll be ready to continue on with the installation process. Alright, so you can see the download has completed now, so I'm just going to click on my little Finder icon, and that's going to open it up to where it's been downloaded, which in this case is in the Downloads folder, and I'm just going to double click that as I would any DMG file on a Mac to open it. And once that's verified, it'll pop up. Then all we literally need to do is just drag the Android Studio icon over to the Applications icon to install it. Give that a minute to finish. Alright, so that's finished. I can close that down, and I'll actually close down the browser as well. And I'll also eject this file now that we're finished with it. And we'll go into the Applications folder, and we've got Android Studio there, so I'm going to double click on that. And it'll pop up with this message for you just to say it's been downloaded from the internet. Obviously this has come from developer.android.com, so we can be assured it's the official source. Click on Open. And I'm just going to close this down now. Now, you may get this, or you will get this pop-up when you install Android Studio. If you're coming from a previous version, you'll find that you will have an option to import your settings from the other location, and more than likely, it'll point to your existing installation so you can grab the settings, which is very useful if you've configured Android Studio in a certain way. In my case, this is a brand new installation, so I'm going to leave that default selected, which is I do not have a previous version of Studio. So I'm going to click on OK. That's going to start up Android Studio. Well, at least the installer anyway. Alright, so we now go through the setup wizard to finish the installation and to also download the software development kit. So I'm going to click on Next. And you can click on Custom if you like. Either will probably be okay because we will be configuring Android Studio in a separate video. Now you've got two options here to select for a theme. You can go with one with a white background or a dark color with a dark background. Either one is okay. You just choose the one that you're happy with. Bearing in mind you can change that settings or change the theme later in the settings. So I'm going to leave everything here as the default. We're going to configure an Android virtual device later, but I'm going to install Haxum. And this is the Android Software Development Kit location, so we don't really need to change that. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. So click on Next. Now, because this is Haxum, it's asking you or recommending how much RAM to use to allocate for this software product, which helps with speeding up the emulators. Now, in this case, I'm going to leave it on 2 gigabytes. But if you've got less than 6 gigabytes, I'd recommend 1024 megabytes or even 512 megabytes. Now it's showing that I've only got 6 gigabytes on my system, but this is actually a virtual machine running on top of my regular Mac, which has got 32 gigabytes of RAM. So I'm going to leave it on 2 gigabytes in any event. And by the way, you do need Haxum to install and use the faster emulators. So you shouldn't have any drama in terms of running Haxum. It'll only be if you haven't got a lot of memory. So just reconfigure that memory depending on how much you've actually got on your computer. All right, so I'm going to click on Next and click on Finish. And that's going to start the download process and start downloading the software development kit. And just while that's downloading and installing, I just want to show you a message that may pop up on the screen and what to do about it. So you may see an error like this pop up, but you shouldn't because you're on a Mac, because all recent Macs have got this ability to actually use this Haxum tool. But if you do see that error message, and if that happens, then you won't be able to take advantage of the Haxum acceleration features when you run your emulator. And we'll be talking more about what emulators are in this Haxum in future videos. And in fact, you can see on the screen there, I say that in the next video, when we configure the software development kit, you'll need to install the ARM emulators instead of the x86 ones. But don't worry if a lot of that doesn't make sense, because I will explain that in detail in that next video. The bottom line is we'll still get an emulator, be able to get an emulator working on your computer. Now, modern Macs running Intel processors should have virtualization enabled. So if you get a problem, there's a link on the page there, and it's also in the resources section of this video. So go ahead and check that out if and only if you're getting any errors. All right, so let's go back and see how the download is progressing. All right, so you can see it's still downloading the various software development kit tools that we need to be able to install Android applications. All right, you can see the installation is now completed, and in fact I did actually get an error message that you saw me talk about previously as this was downloading, and this is because I'm actually running the installation on a virtual machine. So I'm sort of running a version of OS X over the top of my installation of OS X. So you, generally speaking, should not ever see that error message, because pretty well all modern Macs, from the last sort of 7 or 8 years, do fully support virtualization and should work fine. So if you do get that error, just refer to that link that I talked about, and that is also available in the resources section of this video. Okay, so that's it. We've now done the basic installation of Android Studio for your Mac. And in the next video, we're going to look at actually configuring Android Studio. And the steps from this point on now are largely the same regardless of which operating system you're using. So skip over the other videos that don't relate to Mac in this section and move on to the Android Studio configuration video, and we'll get started configuring Android Studio for your computer. We'll see you in that next video.